context matters. I mean, we are having this conversation in early 2024, right? 2022 has happened. So there's something about this time that is interesting. I mean, it's not like Charles Dickens said, best of times, worst of times. Not that, right? Maybe. The point is that people had begun to question representative democracy, right? So people wanted something like direct democracy, maybe, right? And then, poor me, I get barraged with all these characters coming and telling me that technology has got all the solutions and you're like the guy, you're the man. So tell us how the hell it's going to work with new technology, right? So what I did was, in the end, you see, nothing is actually, technology is a means, not an end, right? So why is it that you have representative democracy? Is because, you can't have 22 million people debating issues, right? So you appoint 225, but now our people are saying, Desi Visipama Horu, right? So what do you do about this? Then you have, so I actually went back, read Rousseau and so on. I would recommend anyone who hasn't read these old guys, what do they call them? Dead white males, right? So it's not supposed to be correct to read dead white males. But you see, I have had this ambition in all my life to be dead and read. Not read R-E-D, but R-E-A-D. See, that is sort of the significance of my work, is that people are reading what I've written after I'm dead. So I can't qualify as a dead white male, but I can qualify as a dead brown male. So that has been my ambition in life, right? Except I don't know whether it has been achieved or not, since I'll be dead by then. What to do? Anyway, so one of the biggest problems that people like Rousseau dealt with in the old days was what happens to minorities. A lot of people in our country think that democracy is majority rule. What people like Rousseau were thinking about, what happens to the minorities? And that, I think, is fundamental to the concept of personal democracy that Randula has come up with, right? How does that work? That if only the majority view is won, what happens to the minorities? And if there are minorities that keep getting hammered over and over again, if you really think back to the 75 years of our history, the Jaffna-centric Tamil people formally, through their own parties, in their own right, have been in cabinet how many times? Does anybody know? Mr. G.G. Ponnambalam was Minister of Industries for a very short period under DS. There was also the Tamil Congress. And then 1965 to 70, we had something called the Hathaula, 7 parties in coalition, and Mr. Tiruchelvam. If you've heard of the great man Neelan Tiruchelvam, this was his father, was a minister. He was the Minister of Local Government and Housing or something like that. But he was structurally in the system. After that, you've had, Dougie and various other people, but they have not been there in a sort of formal sense, like they were needed and they were there, right? Mr. Thondaman was another story altogether. That's a separate story that we can talk about, right? But the minorities have not truly been part of the ruling coalitions, the governing structures of this country. So what about them? I mean, should they always be on the outside? Should they be inside sometimes, right? So one has to think about that. Then I come to the question, let's see. Let's try something that I don't know. Now, I've been looking for the word. I think the critical thing in democracy is not majority rule, it's compromise. That's what democracy is about. It's compromise, right? Because that's the way you accommodate the minorities. Now, the question I have is, what is the Sinhala word for compromise? Does anybody know? Are you guys like first language English kind of people? Mukak? කිරීම නෑ. We had to make a word. I mean, I did most of my exams in Sinhala, right? Including science and various horrible things. I know this stuff. There's no single word. අපි හැදුවේ මැදුම් සම්මුතිය කියලා එකක් හැදුවා. මැදුම් සම්මුතිය. It had to be, we had to create one because there is no such word in Sinhala. In Tamil, I've been told that there's one by some people, while other people also insist that there isn't one. So if you guys know the Tamil word, if there's a single word for compromise, let me know. But the point is that it doesn't seem to be part of our sort of feudal culture to compromise, right? So I'm just going to read something for you and then I will get to the last part of this. Democracy requires compromise, even when you are 100% right. This is hard to explain sometimes. You can be completely right and you're still going to have to engage folk who disagree with you. If you think that the only way forward is to be as uncompromising as possible, you will feel good about yourself, you will enjoy a certain moral purity, but you're not going to get what you want. And if you don't get what you want long enough, you will eventually think the whole system is rigged. That will lead to more cynicism and less participation and a downward spiral of more injustice and more anger and more despair. This can be found in the Hansard of Sri Lanka. It was read into the Hansard by a friend of mine because I had published it. Now, I didn't write it. He didn't write it. This was Obama's speech in 2016 to people who were the leaders, the student leaders of Harvard University. I keep mispronouncing this. People hear Harvard. It ain't Harvard. This is Harvard. Got it? H-O-W. Yeah. It's the most prestigious black university in the United States. These are the guys who are leading Black Lives Matter and things like that. And that's what Obama was telling them. Saying, even if you're 100% right, you have to compromise in order to get things done. Right? Right? So, that's the first part of this. Democracy is the art of getting to compromise. Now, the last part of this conversation is, what has technology got to do with it? Can you really get people closer to consensus using technology? I can talk much more about it. Maybe I'll just leave it with you, that question. And maybe I'll answer that question once the discussion gets going, right? Because people have told me that we can have referenda. Now, we can put public policy to people and they can debate it and they can vote on it and we can decide. They have told me that we can have recall elections. They have said that we can have all sorts of things. And there is something that I published in Sinhala, in Anidda, and in English, maybe in FT, I can't remember. It's there somewhere on the web. The title of that is Democracy is a Conversation, Not a Multiple Choice Questionnaire. That's what I published, right? So we can talk about what technology does there, because I've thought long and hard about that question and I have answers, what tech can do and cannot do. But I'm not going to tell you. We'll talk about that later.